The scream tore through the night like a blade through cloth, and Xander Thornhill was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, heart hammering against his ribs as he stumbled from his bed toward the small room at the end of the hallway. This was the fourth night in a row, and each time the sound carved something raw and aching from his chest, a helplessness he had not felt since the war ended 3 years ago. He pushed open the door to find her thrashing in the narrow bed he had built for her, her green skin slick with sweat in the moonlight streaming through the window, her tusks bared as she fought invisible enemies in her sleep. Kira was curled into herself, her muscular frame shaking violently, and the thin blanket had been kicked to the floor in her struggle. Xander approached slowly, carefully, the way he had learned to do after the first night when she had nearly broken his nose with a wild swing upon waking. He knelt beside the bed and spoke her name softly, once, twice, 3 times, until her amber eyes snapped open, wild and unseeing at first before they focused on his face in the dimness. "You are safe," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You are in my house. No one is hurting you." Her breathing came in ragged gasps, and for a moment she simply stared at him as though trying to remember where she was, who he was, why she should trust the human man kneeling beside her bed in the middle of the night. Then the shaking intensified, and without thinking, Xander sat on the edge of the bed and reached for her, pulling her upright and into his arms, holding her against his chest as the tremors racked through her body. She was all hard muscle and sharp edges, her skin fever warm beneath his hands, and she did not resist as he held her, though he felt the tension in every line of her frame. "I have you," he murmured into the darkness, one hand moving in slow circles across her back. "I have you. You are safe here." Kira said nothing, but gradually the shaking began to subside, her breathing evening out as minutes passed in silence broken only by the sound of crickets outside and the creak of the old farmhouse settling on its foundation. Xander did not let go until he felt her muscles relax, until her weight leaned more fully into him, until he was certain the worst had passed. Only then did he ease back slightly, enough to see her face in the pale light. "The same dream?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded once, a sharp jerk of her chin, and looked away from him, shame and anger warring in her expression. "I am sorry I woke you again." "Do not apologize," Xander said firmly. "Not for this, never for this." Kira's jaw tightened, and he saw her fighting to compose herself, to rebuild the walls she kept so carefully maintained during waking hours. She was 19 years old, barely more than a girl despite her warrior's build and the scars that marked her arms and shoulders, and she had been living in his home for only 2 weeks since he had found her half dead in his north field, her leg caught in a hunter's trap, fever burning through her from infection and exposure. He had carried her to the house, despite every voice of reason in his head telling him this was madness, that helping an orc would bring nothing but trouble, that the villagers would turn on him if they knew. But he had seen the terror in her eyes when she first woke to find herself in his spare room, the way she had tried to fight him even as she could barely lift her head, and something in him had simply refused to turn away. He had treated her wounds with the same care he would have shown any injured creature, had fed her broth and bread when she was strong enough to eat, had given her space and time to heal without demanding explanations or gratitude. "You want to talk about it?" he asked now, though he expected the same answer she had given every other night. To his surprise, Kira did not immediately refuse. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her hands where they rested in her lap, fingers curled into loose fists. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I dream of the raid," she said. "The one that destroyed my village. I see my mother's face. I hear her screaming my name, and then I see nothing but fire." Xander's chest tightened. She had mentioned the raid only once before, in fragments when the fever had been at its worst, and she had been delirious with pain. He had pieced together that her clan had been attacked by human soldiers, that she had been one of the few survivors, that she had been running for weeks before the trap had caught her. "How long ago?" he asked gently. 2 months, Kira said. "Maybe 3. The days blend together when you are hiding, always moving. And your family," her jaw worked, and he saw the muscles in her throat contract as she swallowed hard. "Dead. All of them. My mother, my father, my 2 brothers. The soldiers killed everyone they could find and burned the rest." The matter-of-fact way she said it made it somehow worse, as though she had repeated these words to herself so many times that they had lost their ability to hurt, had become simply facts to be recited. Xander felt anger kindle in his gut, the same helpless rage he had felt during the war when he had seen what men could do to one another in the name of borders and kings and ancient grudges. "I am sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate, knowing nothing he could say would ease that kind of loss. "You did not deserve that. No one does." Kira looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the armor she wore so carefully. "Why do you help me?" she asked. "You are human. Your people did this to mine. You should hate me." "I do not hate you," Xander said simply. "I do not hate anyone anymore. I have seen enough of hate and what it does. It solves nothing and leaves everyone poorer for it." "That is easy to say when your family was not murdered." "My family is dead too," Xander said, and watched her eyes widen slightly. "Different reasons, different circumstances, but dead all the same. My parents died of fever when I was 16. My younger sister died in the war, caught in a crossfire between 2 armies that neither wanted to be part of. I fought for 3 years in that war, and when I came home, this farm was all I had left. So no, I do not think it is easy. But I think hate would have killed me by now if I had let it take root." Kira studied him in the moonlight, her amber eyes searching his face as though looking for deception, for hidden cruelty, for any sign that his kindness was a trap. He met her gaze steadily, letting her see whatever she needed to see, and after a moment she looked away again, something in her shoulders loosening. "I do not know how to stop the dreams," she said quietly. "They will fade with time," Xander told her, hoping it was true, praying it was true. "It will not feel like this forever." She said nothing to that, but when he moved to stand, to return to his own room and let her try to sleep again, her hand shot out and caught his wrist. Her grip was strong, her palm calloused and warm, and when he looked down at her in surprise, he saw vulnerability in her face that she had not shown before. "Stay," she said. "Just for a little while, please." Xander hesitated only a heartbeat before he nodded and settled back onto the edge of the bed, his back against the wall, and Kira shifted to lean against his shoulder, her breathing still uneven but calmer now. He did not speak, did not move except to rest one hand on her arm, a steady presence in the darkness, and eventually he felt her begin to drift, her weight growing heavier as sleep claimed her once more. He stayed until the sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn, until he was certain the nightmares would not return, and only then did he carefully ease away and return to his own bed for what little rest remained of the night. The pattern continued for the next week. Every night, or nearly every night, the screams would come, and every night Xander would go to her, would hold her until the shaking stopped, would stay until she fell asleep again. During the day, they moved around each other with careful politeness, Kira helping with small tasks around the farm as her leg healed and her strength returned, Xander working the fields and tending the animals, and trying not to think too hard about what it meant that he was harboring an orc in his home. The villagers did not come out this far often, but when they did, Kira hid in the root cellar beneath the kitchen, and Xander made excuses for why he could not invite them in, why he needed to keep the visit short. He hated the deception, but he knew what would happen if they discovered her, knew the kind of violence that would follow, and he would not allow that. Not while she was under his protection. It was on the 8th day that things shifted between them, subtle at first, then undeniable. Xander had been repairing the fence along the eastern pasture when he heard a shout from the direction of the barn. Kira's voice raised in alarm, and he dropped his tools and ran, fear spiking through him as he imagined soldiers, hunters, anyone who might have discovered her. Instead, he found her standing in the barn doorway, her eyes fixed on something inside, her whole body tense. "What is it?" he asked, slightly breathless as he reached her side. She pointed without speaking, and he followed her gaze to see one of his goats lying on its side in the straw, clearly in distress, her sides heaving with labored breaths. He swore under his breath and moved quickly into the barn, kneeling beside the animal, running his hands over her swollen belly. The kid was coming, but something was wrong, the position not right, and if he did not act quickly, he would lose them both. "I need hot water and clean cloths," he said over his shoulder to Kira. "Quickly." She hesitated only a moment before she turned and ran toward the house, and Xander focused his attention on the goat, murmuring soothing words as he examined her more carefully. By the time Kira returned with what he had requested, he had determined that the kid was breech, and his hands were already moving to correct the position, working as gently as he could while the mother bleated in pain. "What can I do?" Kira asked, setting the bucket and cloths beside him. "Hold her head," Xander said. "Keep her calm. Talk to her." Kira dropped to her knees without hesitation and cradled the goat's head in her lap, her large hands surprisingly gentle as she stroked the animal's neck and began to speak in a low, rhythmic voice. Xander did not understand the words, realized she was speaking in the orc tongue, but the tone was soothing and the goat seemed to respond, her struggles easing slightly as Kira continued her steady stream of soft words. It took nearly an hour of careful work, Xander's arms aching and his shirt soaked with sweat, but finally he felt the kid shift into the right position, and moments later it slid free into his waiting hands, small and wet and perfect. He cleared its mouth and nose quickly, rubbing it with a cloth until it bleated and began to move, and then the mother was turning to nuzzle her newborn, the crisis past. Xander sat back on his heels, exhausted and relieved, and looked up to find Kira watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Her hands were still on the goat, still offering comfort, but her eyes were on him, amber and intent in the dim light of the barn. "You have done that before," she said, not quite a question. "A few times," Xander admitted, "not always successfully. I am glad this one made it." Kira looked down at the kid, now nursing greedily, and something softened in her face. "You are good with them, the animals. They trust you." "I try to be gentle," Xander said. "They deserve that much." "Most humans are not gentle," Kira said quietly. "Most humans take what they want and destroy what they cannot use." "Most humans are afraid," Xander countered. "Fear makes people cruel, but it does not have to be that way." Kira met his gaze again, and he saw her considering his words, weighing them against her own experiences, against the horrors she had lived through. After a moment, she nodded slowly, as though conceding a point she had not expected to concede. They cleaned up in silence, working side by side to ensure the mother and kid were comfortable and had everything they needed. And when they finally emerged from the barn into the afternoon sunlight, Xander felt the exhaustion of the day settling into his bones. He stretched, rolling his shoulders, and caught Kira watching him again, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you," he said, "for your help. I could not have done that alone." "You did all the work," Kira said, but there was less edge to her voice than usual, less of the careful distance she maintained. "I only held her." "That was important too," Xander said. "She was calmer with you there. You have a good touch." Something flickered in Kira's eyes, something that might have been pleasure or surprise, and she looked away quickly, as though uncomfortable with the praise. "I should start dinner," she said abruptly, and turned toward the house before he could respond. Xander watched her go, noting the slight limp that still marked her gait, though it was improving every day, and felt something shift in his chest, something warm and complicated that he was not ready to examine too closely. He returned to his work on the fence, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the barn, to the way Kira had knelt beside him without question, to the sound of her voice speaking in her own tongue, soft and soothing and utterly unlike the harsh, guttural sounds humans usually associated with orcs. That night, the screams did not come until well past midnight, and when Xander reached her room, he found Kira already sitting up, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried against her legs. She was not crying, but her whole body was rigid with the effort of containing whatever emotions the nightmare had brought with it. "Kira," he said softly from the doorway. She lifted her head slightly, just enough to look at him, and he saw the exhaustion in her face, the weariness that went bone deep. "I am tired of this," she said, her voice rough. "I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of dreaming of fire and blood. I am tired of feeling like I am still running even when I am standing still." Xander crossed the room and sat beside her on the bed, not touching her yet, just present. "I know," he said. "I know it feels endless right now, but you are stronger than you think. You survived something that would have broken most people. That matters." "What if surviving is not enough?" Kira asked, and there was something raw and desperate in her voice. "What if I can never be more than this, more than someone who flinches at shadows and screams in the dark?" "Then you keep trying," Xander said firmly. "And you let the people who care about you help carry the weight when it gets too heavy. You do not have to do this alone." Kira turned to look at him fully, and in her eyes he saw hope and disbelief warring with each other, as though she wanted to believe him but could not quite let herself. "Why do you care?" she asked. "I am nothing to you, just another mouth to feed, another problem to manage." "You are not nothing," Xander said, and the words came out more fiercely than he intended. "You are a person who has been hurt badly and deserves a chance to heal. You are someone who helps birth kids in the barn and makes better bread than I ever could and speaks gently to frightened animals. You are not nothing, Kira, not to me." She stared at him, and he watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly to name before she turned away again, her hands clenching in the blanket. "I do not know what to do with kindness," she said quietly. "My clan taught me to be strong, to fight, to never show weakness. And then the soldiers came, and being strong was not enough. Nothing was enough." "You do not have to know what to do with it," Xander said. "Just let it be there. Let yourself rest." For a long moment, Kira said nothing, and then, so quietly he almost missed it, she whispered, "Will you stay?" "Like before, of course," Xander said, and shifted to lean back against the wall, letting her lean into him the way she had on previous nights. She was warm and solid against his side, her breathing still uneven but gradually calming, and he rested his hand on her shoulder, a steady anchor in the darkness. "Tell me about the farm," Kira said suddenly. "Tell me what it was like before the war." So Xander talked, his voice low and steady, painting pictures of summers spent working alongside his father in the fields, of his mother's garden overflowing with vegetables and herbs, of his sister's laughter echoing through the house on winter evenings. He told her about the rhythms of farm life, the planting and harvesting, the animals born and raised and sold, the simple satisfaction of working with his hands and watching things grow. He talked until her breathing deepened and her weight grew heavy against him, until he was certain she was asleep, and then he kept talking anyway, filling the silence with stories she would not remember, but that might, if he was lucky, keep the nightmares at bay a little longer. The days began to blur together in a way that felt less like monotony and more like something settling into place, a routine that was comfortable rather than confining. Kira's leg healed fully, and with it came a restlessness that Xander recognized, the need to be useful, to contribute, to feel like more than a burden. He found tasks for her that matched her strength, hauling water from the well, chopping wood for the winter stores, helping to clear brush from the new field he planned to plant in the spring. She worked with a fierce determination, as though proving something to herself, and Xander let her, understanding that she needed this. In the evenings, they began to talk more, small conversations over dinner that grew longer and deeper as the days passed. Kira asked about his time in the war, and though he did not want to revisit those memories, he found himself answering honestly, describing the confusion and fear and occasional moments of unexpected humanity that had marked those years. In turn, she began to share pieces of her own life, stories of her clan, of growing up in the borderlands where orc and human territories overlapped in uneasy proximity, of learning to fight and hunt and survive in a world that saw her kind as monsters. "We are not so different, your people and mine," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the western hills. "We love our families. We fear losing them. We want to live in peace and be left alone." "I know," Xander said. "I have always known that, even when others tried to convince me otherwise." Kira looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You are strange for a human," she said, and though the words might have been an insult, her tone was almost fond. "Most would not even see me as a person." "Then most are fools," Xander said simply, and was rewarded with a small smile, the first real smile he had seen from her since she arrived. The nightmares continued, but with less frequency and less intensity. Some nights passed peacefully, Kira sleeping through until dawn, and on those mornings she seemed lighter, more present, the shadows in her eyes receding bit by bit. Other nights still brought the screams, and Xander still went to her, still held her until the shaking stopped, and neither of them spoke of how natural it had become, how easily they had fallen into this pattern of care and comfort. It was a month after Kira's arrival that the first real problem emerged. Xander had gone into the village for supplies, leaving Kira at the farm with strict instructions to stay out of sight, and he had returned to find a horse tied outside his house, a horse he recognized as belonging to Marcus Thorne, one of his nearest neighbors. His heart had dropped into his stomach, and he had hurried inside to find Marcus sitting at his kitchen table, his weathered face grim, and Kira standing against the far wall, her arms crossed, her expression defiant but wary. "Marcus," Xander said carefully, setting down his purchases and trying to assess the situation. "This is unexpected." "I would imagine so," Marcus said, his voice hard, "given that you are hiding an orc in your house." "She is not hiding," Xander said, keeping his voice level. "She is staying here as my guest while she recovers from an injury." "Your guest," Marcus repeated flatly. "Xander, have you lost your mind? Do you know what would happen if the village found out? They would burn this place to the ground with both of you inside." "Then it is fortunate that you are not going to tell them," Xander said, and there was steel in his voice now, a warning. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. I came out here to ask if you wanted help with the spring planting, he said. I was concerned because you have been keeping to yourself more than usual. I thought you might be ill. Instead, I find you have taken leave of your senses entirely. She needed help, Xander said. I gave it. That is all. That is not all, and you know it, Marcus said, rising from his chair. This is not some injured bird you are nursing back to health, Xander. She is an orc. Her people and our people have been at war for generations. There is blood between us that will not wash away with kindness and good intentions. I fought in that war, Xander said quietly. I saw what it did to both sides. I will not continue it under my own roof. Marcus looked from Xander to Kira and back again, and something in his expression softened slightly, though the concern remained. I understand you are lonely out here, he said more gently. I understand you want to help. But this will not end well, for either of you. That is my risk to take, Xander said. Marcus sighed, a long, weary sound. I am not going to report you, he said finally, because you saved my son's life during the war and I owe you a debt I can never repay. But Xander, please. Think about what you are doing. Think about the consequences. I have thought about nothing else, Xander said honestly, and I am still choosing this. Marcus shook his head again, but he moved toward the door, pausing only to look back at Kira. If you hurt him, he said, his voice low and dangerous, there will be nowhere you can run that I will not find you. Do you understand? I understand, Kira said, meeting his gaze without flinching. But I have no intention of hurting him. He showed me mercy when he had every reason not to. I will not forget that. Something in Marcus's expression shifted at that, surprise maybe, or grudging respect, and then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Xander stood frozen for a moment, his heart still racing, before he let out a long breath and turned to Kira. Are you all right? He asked. I should be asking you that, Kira said. He is your neighbor, your friend maybe, and now he knows. Marcus will not say anything, Xander said, hoping it was true. He owes me. And more than that, he is a good man beneath the anger. He will come around. You have too much faith in people, Kira said, but there was no real criticism in her voice, only something that sounded almost like wonder. Maybe, Xander admitted, but I would rather have too much faith than too little. Kira crossed the room to stand in front of him, and he was struck by how close they were, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. She was taller than him by a few inches, broad-shouldered and strong, and yet there was something vulnerable in the way she looked at him now, something open and uncertain. Why do you risk so much for me? She asked softly. The truth, Xander. Not just because it is the right thing to do or because you are kind. Why? He could have deflected, could have given her one of a dozen easy answers that would have satisfied the question without revealing the truth he had been trying not to acknowledge even to himself. But standing there with her so close, with her eyes searching his face, he found he could not lie. Because when I look at you, I do not see an orc or an enemy or any of the things I am supposed to see, he said quietly. I see someone brave and strong and determined to survive, despite everything that has been taken from her. I see someone who speaks gently to frightened animals and makes me laugh without meaning to and does not deserve any of the pain she has endured. And I see someone I am coming to care about more than I probably should. Kira's breath caught, and for a moment she simply stared at him, her eyes wide, before she reached up with one hand and touched his face, her calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against his cheek. You are going to break my heart, she whispered, or I am going to break yours. This cannot end any other way. Maybe, Xander said, covering her hand with his own, or maybe we find a way to make it work that no one else has thought of yet. You are ridiculous, Kira said, but there was no heat in it, and when she leaned down to press her forehead against his, he felt the tension drain from both of them, replaced by something tentative and fragile and real. They stood like that for a long moment, not quite kissing but not pulling away either, balanced on the edge of something that terrified and thrilled them both. Then Kira stepped back, her hand falling away from his face, and cleared her throat awkwardly. "I should finish preparing dinner," she said, and Xander nodded, recognizing the need to step back from the precipice, to give them both time to process what had just passed between them. "I will check on the goats," he said, and escaped outside into the cooling evening air, his heart still pounding, his skin still tingling where she had touched him. That night, Kira did not scream. Instead, Xander woke to find her standing in his doorway, a darker shadow against the darkness of the hallway. And when he sat up in concern, she crossed the room without speaking and climbed into his bed, curling against him with a trust that made his throat tight. He wrapped his arms around her and felt her relax into his embrace, her breathing evening out as she drifted back to sleep, and he lay awake for a long time staring at the ceiling and wondering what the morning would bring. Dawn came with pale light and the sound of birds, and when Xander woke, Kira was still there, her head pillowed on his shoulder, her hair spread across his chest. She stirred when he moved, her eyes opening slowly, and for a heartbeat he saw confusion in her face before memory returned, and she tensed, as though preparing to flee or fight or offer some explanation. "Stay," Xander said softly, and she relaxed again, settling back against him. "This is foolish," she murmured, but she made no move to leave. "Probably," Xander agreed, "but I find I do not care as much as I should." Kira huffed a quiet laugh, and he felt it vibrate through both their bodies where they were pressed together. "What are we doing?" she asked. "I do not know," Xander said honestly, "but I do not want to stop." "Neither do I," Kira admitted, and there was relief in her voice as though confessing this truth had lifted some weight she had been carrying. "But Xander, Marcus was right. This will not be easy. People will not understand. They will try to hurt us." "Let them try," Xander said, and felt her smile against his shoulder. "You sound very brave right now," she said, "but you have never faced down an angry mob." "Neither have you, I hope," Xander said, and felt her tense slightly. "Once," she said quietly. "When I was younger, a group of human hunters found me in the woods alone. They would have killed me if my brothers had not arrived in time. I was 12 years old, and I remember the look in their eyes, the absolute certainty that I was not a person, just a thing to be destroyed." Xander tightened his arms around her, wishing he could reach back through time and protect the child she had been, knowing he could not. "I am sorry," he said inadequately. "It is the world we live in," Kira said. "But maybe, if people like you and me can find a way to be together, the world changes a little. Maybe not enough, maybe not fast enough, but a little." "I like that thought," Xander said, and pressed a kiss to the top of her head without thinking, then froze, realizing what he had done. Kira went still, and for a moment he thought he had overstepped, had pushed too far too fast, but then she tilted her head back to look up at him, her amber eyes soft in the morning light. "Do that again," she said quietly. So he did, kissing her forehead, her temple, the bridge of her nose, and when she turned her face up to his fully, he kissed her mouth, gentle and careful, mindful of her tusks, mindful of how new this was for both of them. She responded tentatively at first, then with more confidence, her hand coming up to cup the back of his neck, and the kiss deepened into something warm and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Xander could not help the smile that spread across his face, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside him. Kira was smiling too, a real smile that transformed her whole face, made her look younger and lighter and utterly beautiful. "We should get up," she said, but made no move to do so. "We should," Xander agreed, equally unmoved. They lay there a while longer, wrapped in each other and the quiet morning, before the practical needs of the day finally forced them from the bed. They moved through the morning routine with a new awareness of each other, small touches and glances that carried weight, and Xander felt something settle in his chest, something that felt dangerously like happiness. The days that followed fell into a new pattern, one that included stolen moments of affection, kisses exchanged in the barn or the garden, conversations that stretched long into the night as they learned each other in ways that went beyond words. Kira told him about her mother's gift for healing, about her father's quiet strength, about her brother's constant teasing, and the way they had protected her even as they pushed her to be stronger. Xander shared his own memories of family, of his sister's fierce loyalty and his parents' unwavering support, and they grieved together for the people they had lost, finding comfort in shared understanding. The nightmares did not disappear entirely, but they came less frequently now, and when they did, Xander was always there, holding her until the shaking stopped, whispering reassurances and promises into her hair. And on the nights when she did not scream, she came to his room anyway, and they fell asleep tangled together, two people who had found unexpected solace in each other against all odds and reason. It was 6 weeks after Kira's arrival that Marcus returned, this time with his wife Emma in tow. Xander saw them coming from the field where he was working and felt his stomach drop, but when he reached the house, he found Emma sitting at the kitchen table with Kira, the two of them talking quietly while Marcus stood by the window looking uncomfortable. "Emma wanted to meet her," Marcus said by way of greeting when Xander entered. "I could not talk her out of it." "I am glad you did not try," Emma said firmly, turning to smile at Xander. "Kira has been telling me about her mother's herb garden. It sounds remarkably similar to the one I keep." Xander looked between the two women, searching for signs of tension or fear, and found instead something that looked almost like the beginning of friendship. Kira met his gaze and gave a small shrug, her expression bemused but not unhappy, and he felt some of his worry ease. "Would you like to stay for lunch?" Xander offered, and Emma accepted with enthusiasm, launching into a discussion of recipes with Kira that left both men standing awkwardly to the side. As they ate, Emma asked careful questions about Kira's life, her clan, her experiences, and Kira answered with increasing openness, clearly surprised by the genuine interest and lack of judgment. Marcus remained quiet, but Xander noticed him watching Kira closely, reassessing, and when their eyes met across the table, Marcus gave a small nod, not quite acceptance but no longer outright hostility. After they left, Kira stood on the porch watching them ride away, her arms crossed over her chest. "Your friends are strange," she said. "They are good people," Xander said, coming to stand beside her. "They just needed to see you as a person rather than an idea." "Do you think others would do the same?" Kira asked, and there was hope in her voice, fragile and tentative. "Some," Xander said honestly. "Not all, maybe not even most, but some." Kira turned to look at him, and he saw determination in her face, a decision being made. "I want to stay here," she said. "Not just until I am healed or until winter passes. I want to stay with you if you will have me." Xander felt his heart expand in his chest, felt joy and fear and love all tangled together until he could not separate them. "There is nothing I want more," he said. "But Kira, you need to understand what that means. If you stay, if we do this openly, there will be consequences. People will talk. Some will be cruel. It will not be easy." "Nothing worth having is easy," Kira said, echoing words he had once spoken to her. "And you are worth having, Xander Thornhill. You are worth fighting for." He kissed her then, there on the porch in full daylight where anyone passing might see, and he did not care who knew or what they thought. When they broke apart, Kira was smiling and he saw peace in her eyes, the shadows finally beginning to recede. "We should tell Marcus and Emma," Xander said. "If we are doing this, we do it properly. Let them know our intentions. You want to court me?" Kira asked, and there was laughter in her voice, but also wonder. "I want more than that," Xander said, "but courting seems like a good place to start." So they rode to Marcus's farm the next day, and Xander formally introduced Kira as the woman he intended to build a life with. Marcus looked pained but resigned, while Emma was openly delighted, and by the time they left, Emma had extracted a promise that Kira would visit regularly to work on her herb garden and share recipes. Word spread slowly through the community, carried on whispers and sidelong glances, and the reactions were mixed. Some neighbors stopped visiting altogether, their disapproval clear in their absence. Others came by out of curiosity, and a few, like Emma, made genuine efforts to welcome Kira despite their own reservations. The village council sent a representative to warn Xander that they could not protect him if trouble arose, and he thanked them politely and sent them on their way. Through it all, Kira remained steady, her strength a constant source of amazement to Xander. She handled hostility with dignity and kindness with gratitude, never letting the judgment of others diminish her sense of self. She worked the farm alongside him, her strength and endurance proving invaluable as they prepared for the coming winter. And in the evenings, they sat together by the fire, talking and laughing and simply being together. The first snow came in late autumn, earlier than expected, and with it came a problem neither of them had anticipated. A young orc woman appeared at their door one evening, half frozen and desperate, begging for shelter. Her name was Vara, and she had been traveling alone for weeks, fleeing from a human settlement where she had been enslaved. Kira took one look at her and brought her inside without hesitation, and Xander found himself with 2 orc women under his roof, the situation growing more complicated by the hour. Vara stayed for 3 days, eating and resting and slowly regaining her strength under Kira's watchful care. She spoke little at first, traumatized by her experiences, but gradually she began to share her story, and Xander listened with growing horror to descriptions of cruelty and dehumanization that made his stomach turn. On the 3rd night, Kira came to him with a request. "There are others like her," she said. "Others who are running, who need help. I want to help them. I want this place to be a safe haven for any orc who needs it." Xander considered the implications, the danger it would bring, the attention it would draw, and then looked at Kira's face at the fierce determination and compassion shining in her eyes, and knew he could not refuse her. "All right," he said, "but we do this carefully. We let Marcus and Emma know what we are doing, build a network of people we can trust. We cannot help anyone if we get ourselves killed." Kira kissed him hard and fast, gratitude and love pouring from her in equal measure, and Xander held her close and wondered what he had gotten himself into, even as he knew he would not change a thing. Vara left a week later, heading north to orc territories with directions to a clan Kira knew would take her in. And though Xander was relieved to see the danger pass, he also felt the weight of what they had committed to, the long road ahead of them. But when he looked at Kira, saw the purpose and hope in her face, he knew they had made the right choice. Winter deepened, bringing storms and cold that kept them inside for days at a time, and Xander discovered new layers to Kira he had not seen before. She was funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh until his sides ached. She was thoughtful, often surprising him with small gestures of affection, a favorite meal prepared without prompting, his tools cleaned and organized while he was working elsewhere. She was fiercely intelligent, with a mind that grasped concepts quickly and a curiosity about the world that seemed boundless. And she was beautiful, though he had always known that on some level. But now, watching her move through his house, her hair down and her guard lowered, he was struck constantly by the grace of her movements, the expressive nature of her face, the way firelight played across her green skin and turned her eyes to molten gold. One night, as they lay in bed with the wind howling outside and snow piling against the windows, Kira turned to him with a question he had been half expecting, half dreading. "You think we will last?" she asked quietly. "Not just through winter, but through all of it. Through years and whatever comes." "I think we have as good a chance as anyone," Xander said carefully. "Maybe better because we have already faced so much and are still here. But Kira, I cannot promise you it will be easy. I cannot promise there will not be times when you regret this choice." "I am not asking for promises," Kira said. "I am asking if you believe in us, in this." Xander pulled her closer until her head was resting on his chest and he could feel the steady beat of her heart against his side. "I believe in you," he said. "I believe in your strength and your courage and your capacity for love despite everything that has tried to destroy it. And I believe that together we can build something worth having, something worth protecting. So yes, I believe in us." Kira was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I love you," she said. "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone after my family died. But I love you, Xander. I need you to know that." "I love you too," Xander said, and felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, happiness and relief washing over him in equal measure. "I think I have loved you since the night you asked me to stay, since you trusted me enough to let me see your fear. I love you, Kira. And I will keep loving you for as long as you will let me." She kissed him then, deep and slow, and they made love with the storm raging outside and the fire burning low in the hearth, two people claiming each other and the future they would build together. Afterwards, Kira fell asleep in his arms, her face peaceful in a way he had never seen before, and Xander lay awake watching her breathe and feeling more content than he had in years. Winter passed slowly but steadily, and as the days grew longer and the snow began to melt, Xander began to make plans. He spoke to Marcus about expanding the farm, about ways to generate more income that would support the work they wanted to do helping refugees. He rode into the village to commission a larger bed from the carpenter, one that would be more comfortable for Kira's larger frame, and endured the man's judgmental silence with patience. He wrote letters to old army friends, testing the waters to see who might be sympathetic to their cause, and was surprised and heartened by several positive responses. Through it all, Kira worked alongside him, her presence a constant source of strength and inspiration. She had begun teaching him the orc language in the evenings, and though he stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds and complex grammar, he persevered, wanting to be able to speak to her in her mother tongue, wanting to honor that part of her heritage. In turn, she asked him to teach her to read and write in the human script, admitting shyly that her education had been limited to practical skills, and he spent patient hours guiding her hand as she learned to form letters and words. Spring arrived with a rush of green and the return of migrating birds, and with it came two more refugees, a mated orc couple who had fled from a settlement to the south. Xander and Kira sheltered them for a week, connecting them with Marcus and Emma, who had agreed to help transport refugees farther north using their larger wagon and horses. The system was crude and risky, but it worked, and by the time summer arrived, they had helped nearly a dozen orcs find safety. The danger escalated when a group of human hunters passed through the area, asking questions about orc sightings and making threats about what they would do if they found any. Xander played dumb, offering them food and drink while Kira hid in the root cellar with their current refugees, her heart pounding so hard he could hear it through the floorboards. The hunters stayed for an hour, suspicion clear in their eyes before finally moving on, and Xander collapsed with relief once they were gone. "This is too dangerous," Kira said that night, her voice tight with fear. "If they had found us, they would have killed everyone, including you." "We knew the risks," Xander said, though his own hands were still shaking from the close call. "We can be more careful, but we cannot stop, not when people need us." "I cannot lose you," Kira said fiercely. "I have lost too much already. I cannot lose you too." "You will not," Xander promised, pulling her into his arms. "We will be smarter about this. We will build better hiding places, create better cover stories. But Kira, we are doing something important here. We are saving lives. That matters." She clung to him, and he felt her fear and determination warring within her before she finally nodded against his chest. "We need more help," she said. "We cannot do this alone anymore." So they reached out, carefully and cautiously, to others who might be sympathetic. Marcus and Emma brought in a few trusted friends, and slowly a network began to form. People willing to provide food, shelter, or transportation to refugees passing through. It was not much, but it was something, and as word spread through the orc communities, more refugees began to seek them out, trusting that the human and orc couple on the frontier farm would help them find safety. By midsummer, Xander's farm had become a way station of sorts, refugees arriving every few weeks and staying just long enough to rest and recover before moving on. The work was exhausting and the danger constant, but Xander felt a sense of purpose he had not experienced since before the war, and seeing the hope in the faces of the people they helped made every risk worthwhile. It was during this time that Kira's nightmares finally stopped completely. She still had bad dreams occasionally, moments when she would wake gasping or tense, but the terrible screaming fits that had marked her first months at the farm faded away, replaced by peaceful sleep and mornings where she woke smiling. Xander noticed the change and felt something in his own chest ease, a worry he had carried for so long finally releasing its grip. "I had the dream again last night," Kira said one morning over breakfast. "The one about the raid." Xander looked up in concern, but her expression was calm, almost thoughtful. "But it was different this time," she continued. "Instead of seeing fire and blood, I saw you. I saw this place. I saw the people we have helped and the life we are building together. And when I woke up, I was not afraid." "I am glad," Xander said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You deserve peace, Kira. You deserve to sleep without fear." "I never thought I would feel safe again," Kira admitted. "After my family died, after everything that happened, I thought I would spend the rest of my life running and hiding and looking over my shoulder. But you gave me a home. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me hope." "You gave me those things too," Xander said. "Before you arrived, I was just going through the motions, working the farm because it was what I knew, but not really living. You reminded me that life can still have meaning, even after loss. You reminded me how to care about something beyond just surviving." Kira squeezed his hand, and they sat like that for a long moment, the morning sun streaming through the windows and the sounds of the farm waking up around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. That afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Xander made a decision that had been forming in his mind for weeks. He waited until evening, until they were sitting on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, before he spoke. Kira, he said, and something in his tone made her turn to look at him fully. I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, not just tell me what you think I want to hear. All right, Kira said warily, her amber eyes searching his face. Xander took a breath, gathering his courage, and reached into his pocket to pull out a simple ring he had commissioned from the village blacksmith, silver worked into a band with small stones embedded in the metal. I know we come from different worlds, he said. I know that according to the laws and customs of both our peoples, what we have is impossible or wrong or doomed to fail. But I do not care about any of that. I care about you. I care about the life we are building together and the people we are helping and the future I want to share with you. He held out the ring, his hand trembling slightly. Kira, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not just in secret or in our own hearts, but openly, so that everyone knows we belong to each other? Kira stared at the ring, her eyes wide, and for a moment Xander feared he had misjudged, had pushed too far, had asked for something she was not ready to give. But then tears began to slide down her cheeks, and she was nodding so hard he worried she would hurt herself. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, of course, yes. I want nothing more than to be your wife, to stand beside you and build this life together and face whatever comes as partners. Xander slipped the ring onto her finger, marveling at how right it looked there. And then Kira was kissing him, fierce and joyful and full of love, and he kissed her back with everything he had, pouring all his hope and devotion into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying, happy tears that they did not bother to wipe away. We will need to find someone to marry us, Xander said practically, though his voice was thick with emotion. Someone who will not refuse because of what we are. There is an elder in the nearest orc clan, Kira said. She is wise and kind, and she has always believed that love transcends boundaries. She will marry us, I think, if we ask her. Then we will go to her, Xander said, as soon as we can safely leave. They made plans over the following weeks, coordinating with Marcus and Emma to ensure the farm would be cared for in their absence, arranging for any refugees who arrived to be directed to other safe houses temporarily. And on a bright morning in late summer, they set out on horseback toward the orc territories, riding north into lands Xander had only heard about in stories and rumors. The journey took 3 days, through forests and across rivers, and as they traveled deeper into orc lands, Xander felt his nerves building. He had fought orcs during the war, had seen them only as enemies, and though Kira had changed his perspective completely, he still worried about how her people would receive him, a human trespassing in their territory. But when they arrived at the clan settlement, a collection of sturdy structures built into the side of a hill and camouflaged with natural vegetation, they were greeted with curiosity rather than hostility. Kira spoke rapidly in her own language to the guards, explaining their purpose, and after a moment of deliberation, they were escorted into the settlement and brought before the elder Kira had mentioned. Her name was Thora, and she was ancient by any measure, her green skin weathered and scarred from a long life of hardship and survival. But her eyes were sharp and kind, and when Kira explained why they had come, Thora smiled, revealing worn tusks, and nodded slowly. You wish to bind yourselves in the old way, Thora said, speaking heavily accented human tongue for Xander's benefit. To declare before witnesses that you choose each other above all others. Yes, Kira said. We know it is unusual, but we love each other and want to build a life together. Thora studied them both for a long moment, her gaze moving from Kira to Xander and back again. It is not unusual, she said finally. It is rare, yes, but not unheard of. In the old days, before the wars, There were marriages between orc and human, alliances built on love and respect rather than fear and violence. Those times have passed, but perhaps they can come again. She rose from her seat, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints no longer worked as they once did. "I will marry you," she said. "But you must understand what this means. You will be bound not just to each other, but to the responsibility of being an example. Others will watch you, orc and human alike, to see if such a union can endure. You will face prejudice and danger and moments when you wonder if the love you share is enough. Are you prepared for that?" "We are," Xander said, and Kira nodded beside him, her hand tight in his. "Then we will perform the ceremony tomorrow at sunset," Thora said. "Prepare yourselves. This is not a small thing you do." They spent the night in a guest structure, lying together in the darkness and talking in whispers about the future they were claiming, the life they would build together. Kira told him more about orc marriage traditions, about the vows they would exchange and the symbolism behind them, and Xander listened with fascination, honored to be included in something so deeply rooted in her culture. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. At sunset, they stood before Thora and a gathering of clan members who had come to witness this unusual union, and Xander felt the weight of all those eyes on him, judging, assessing, waiting to see if he would prove worthy of one of their own. Thora spoke in the orc tongue, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd, and Kira translated quietly for him, her voice steady despite the emotion shining in her eyes. "We gather to witness a binding," Thora said. "To see two souls choose each other freely and without coercion, to see them pledge their lives and futures to one another. This human and this orc come before us seeking our blessing. Do they have it?" There was a moment of tense silence, and then one of the older warriors stepped forward and spoke in the orc language. Kira's breath caught, and she squeezed Xander's hand hard enough to hurt. "He says he knew my father," she whispered. "He says, my father taught him that strength comes not from hatred, but from protecting those we love. He gives us his blessing." Others followed, one by one, clan members offering their support or at least their acceptance, and Xander felt tears prick at his eyes as he realized what this meant, how much it cost these people to set aside their fear and anger and offer him a chance. When the declarations were finished, Thora turned to them and spoke the words of binding, asking them to make their vows. Kira went first, her voice clear and strong as she spoke in her own language, and though Xander did not understand every word, he heard the love and commitment in her tone, the promise of forever. Then it was his turn, and he spoke in the human tongue, trusting Thora to translate for those who could not understand. "I vow to stand beside you in all things," he said, looking into Kira's eyes. "To protect you when you need protection, to support you when you need strength, to love you through joy and sorrow alike. I vow to honor your people and your heritage, to never ask you to be less than you are, to build a home where you are safe and cherished and free. I vow to be your partner, your friend, your husband, for all the days we are given." Tears streamed down Kira's face, and Xander reached up to wipe them away gently, his own vision blurring. Thora spoke a final blessing, binding their hands together with a length of woven cord, and then declared them married in the eyes of the clan, and the spirits that watched over them all. The celebration that followed was joyful and raucous, with food and drink and music that sounded nothing like the human songs Xander knew, but that moved him nonetheless. Clan members approached throughout the evening to offer congratulations or advice, and Xander did his best to respond appropriately, grateful for Kira's presence at his side to guide him through the unfamiliar customs. As the night wore on and the celebration began to wind down, Kira pulled him away from the crowd and led him to a quiet spot overlooking the valley below. The moon was rising, full and bright, and in its light Kira looked otherworldly, beautiful in a way that made his heart ache. "Thank you," she said softly, "for doing this, for being willing to come here and face my people and make these vows in the old way. It means more to me than I can say." "You do not need to thank me," Xander said. "This is what I wanted too. A beginning for us that honors both our traditions and creates something new." Kira leaned into him, and they stood together in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead and feeling the enormity of what they had done, the commitment they had made to each other and to the future they would build together. They stayed with the clan for 2 more days, cementing relationships and making connections that would prove invaluable in their work helping refugees. Thora gave them her blessing to send any orcs fleeing persecution to her clan, promising they would be welcomed and protected, and several younger clan members volunteered to serve as guides and messengers, creating a more organized system for the underground network. When they finally left to return home, Xander felt different, as though something fundamental had shifted inside him. He was no longer just a farmer trying to do the right thing. He was a husband, a partner in something larger than himself, a bridge between 2 worlds that had been at war for so long. The journey home was easier than the journey out, their hearts lighter despite the challenges they knew awaited them. And when they finally rode up to the farm at sunset, tired and dusty from days of travel, they found Marcus and Emma waiting on the porch, their faces anxious until they saw Xander and Kira dismount and walk toward them hand in hand, rings glinting on their fingers. "You did it," Emma said, wonder in her voice. "You actually did it." "We did," Kira confirmed, and there was such happiness in her voice that Emma's face split into a wide grin. "Then we need to celebrate properly," Emma declared. "Tomorrow, we will host a gathering here at your farm, invite everyone who has helped with the refugees, and we will toast your marriage and everything you are building together." Xander looked at Kira, saw his own surprise and pleasure reflected in her face, and nodded. "That would be wonderful," he said. "Thank you, Emma. Thank you both." The gathering the next day was smaller than the orc ceremony but no less meaningful, a collection of humans who had chosen to look past prejudice and fear to see the person rather than the race, the love rather than the taboo. They ate and drank and celebrated late into the evening, and when the guests finally departed, Xander and Kira collapsed onto their new bed, exhausted and happy. "I never imagined this," Kira said as they lay together in the darkness. "When I woke up in your house all those months ago, terrified and hurt and certain I would not survive, I never imagined I would find this. A home, a husband, a purpose. You gave me all of that. You gave it to me too," Xander said. "And we will keep building it together, day by day, until we have created something that lasts beyond us, something that helps others find the same hope we found." "I love you," Kira said, and he heard the depth of that love in every syllable, felt it in the way she held him, in the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "I love you too," Xander replied. "Always." The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. The refugee network continued to grow, helping more people find safety and new lives in the orc territories, or in sympathetic human settlements. There were close calls and dangerous moments, times when Xander feared they had finally pushed too far and would pay the price for their compassion. But each time they found a way through, relying on their network of friends and allies, on their own resourcefulness and determination, on the love that bound them together and gave them strength. Winter came again, and with it a new challenge. Kira discovered she was pregnant. her body showing the signs that Xander had learned to recognize from his time helping the farm animals with their births. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure, the enormity of bringing a child into their complicated world almost overwhelming. "We will figure it out," Xander said, holding her close as she cried tears that were equal parts happiness and fear. "We have figured out everything else. We will figure this out too." "What if the child is rejected by both our peoples?" Kira asked, voicing the fear that had been haunting them both. "What if they are not human enough for the humans or orc enough for the orcs?" "Then they will be ours," Xander said firmly. "And we will love them fiercely and teach them to be proud of all they are, human and orc both. We will raise them to be strong and kind and unafraid of being different. And they will have a community of people who already love them, all those who have helped us and supported us." Kira nodded against his chest, and he felt her fear begin to ease, replaced by determination and hope. They told Marcus and Emma the next day, and Emma wept with joy, immediately launching into plans for preparing the house for a baby, for gathering supplies and making clothes and all the 1,000 things that would be needed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Kira's strong body adapting well to the changes, and as her belly swelled with their growing child, Xander found himself constantly amazed by the reality of what they had created together. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby move, strong kicks that made Kira laugh and wince in equal measure, and the wonder of it never faded. They prepared as best they could, building a cradle and gathering blankets and receiving gifts from their network of friends, both orc and human. Thora sent word that she was praying for them and the child, that whatever the baby's appearance, they would be welcomed in her clan as family. The support meant everything, a reminder that they were not alone in this, that others believed in what they were building. When Kira went into labor on a cold night in early spring, Xander felt terror like he had never known, worse than any battle or close call with hunters. Emma was there to help, her experience with midwifery invaluable, but the hours stretched long and painful. Kira's strength tested to its limits as she labored to bring their child into the world. And then, finally, the baby was born, a girl with green-tinged skin lighter than Kira's but darker than Xander's, tiny tusks barely visible, and a loud cry that filled the room with life and promise. Kira wept as Emma placed the baby in her arms, and Xander knelt beside the bed, his own tears falling freely as he looked at his daughter, his and Kira's, a perfect blend of both of them. "She is beautiful," he whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand, marveling when her fingers curled around his. "She is perfect." "What should we name her?" Kira asked, looking up at him with exhausted joy in her eyes. They had discussed names for weeks, debating human and orc options, trying to find something that honored both traditions. Now, looking at their daughter, Xander knew exactly what felt right. "Sarah," he said. "It is a human name my sister loved." "And for her second name, Thera, after the elder who married us. Sarah Thera Thornhill." "Sarah Thera," Kira repeated, testing the sounds, and then smiled. "Yes, it is perfect. She is perfect. We are perfect." And in that moment, holding his wife and meeting his daughter for the first time, surrounded by friends and love and hope, Xander believed it completely. They had built something impossible, something beautiful, something worth fighting for every single day. The world outside might not understand, might judge them or threaten them or try to tear them apart. But here, in this room, in this life they had created together, there was only love. The months that followed were filled with the exhausting joy of new parenthood, sleepless nights and constant worry balanced by moments of perfect happiness. Sarah's smiles and her first laugh, and the way she reached for both her parents without fear or hesitation. They continued their work helping refugees, though more carefully now with a child to protect, and their network continued to grow. More people joining the cause, more lives saved and transformed. Marcus and Emma became doting grandparents in all but name, visiting often to hold Sarah and help with whatever was needed. The village remained divided in its opinion of Xander's family, some hostile, some accepting, most simply confused, but slowly, very slowly. Attitudes began to shift as people saw that the sky did not fall simply because a human and an orc chose to love each other. Kira's nightmares never returned. She slept peacefully through the nights, her dreams filled not with fire and loss, but with the family she had built, the future she was creating one day at a time. And when Xander held her, as he still did every night, it was not to comfort her through fear but simply to be close, to share the quiet intimacy of two people who had chosen each other and never regretted that choice. Years passed, and Sarah grew into a bright, confident child who moved easily between human and orc communities, learning both languages and both sets of customs, a living bridge between worlds. Other mixed families began to emerge, encouraged by Xander and Kira's example, and slowly the taboo began to lose its power. It was not perfect, not even close, but it was progress, the kind of change that happens one person, one family, one choice at a time. Xander often thought back to that first night when Kira had screamed in her sleep, and he had gone to her, uncertain and afraid but unable to turn away. He thought about how he had held her until the shaking stopped, how that simple act of compassion had led to everything that came after, all the love and joy and purpose he had found. And he was grateful, endlessly grateful, that he had made the choice to help rather than to turn away, that he had seen the person rather than the monster, that he had opened his heart when it would have been easier to close it. And Kira, lying beside him on peaceful nights with their daughter asleep in the next room and the farm quiet around them, would sometimes take his hand and squeeze it gently, a reminder of all they had survived and built together. She no longer screamed in her sleep, but she remembered those nights, remembered the feel of his arms around her when the world felt too dark to bear. And she was grateful, too, for the human who had shown her that life could still hold beauty after tragedy, that love could bloom even in the darkest soil. They had built something impossible. They had built something real. And every day they chose each other again, chose the life they had created together, chose hope over fear and love over hate. It was enough. It was everything. And as they lay together in the quiet darkness, listening to the sound of their daughter breathing and the familiar creaks of the old farmhouse settling, they knew they had found what so many spend their whole lives searching for: a home, a family, a love that would endure whatever the world threw at them. And it had all begun with a scream in the night, and a man who chose to hold rather than to turn away, who chose compassion over fear, who chose love.